Quote, what is culture? Every business has a culture. It may be strictly defined or not at all. Culture can be described most simply as the way we conduct ourselves at work. It is thought to be the singularly most important asset a company can possess. The largest gap we find in our industry is between teams that have a well-defined cultural standard and those that do not. Every business has a culture. The question becomes, who is determining that culture, and is it operating in the best interest of the business or the people wielding influence? End quote. What's up, y'all? Will here at Schedulefly. This is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, brought to you by Schedulefly. Simple restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. If you're on pencil and paper or Excel, or you're on an expensive, cumbersome scheduling platform that gives you tons of data and info and bells and whistles you don't need, we'll make life easier for you so you can get back to focusing on your culture. Schedulefly.com. Check us out. 30-day free trial. Also brought to you by Pop Menu and Kickfin, and you'll hear more from them momentarily. That quote is from a presentation called Building Your Culture, The Aperture Effect. It's by Dave Nitzel and Dave Domzalski. They were on the podcast recently to talk about their excellent new book, Hospitality DNA. And we are very interested and very excited in the topic of culture for this podcast. I do agree with that culture can be the most important asset any business has. We find, 16 years of serving restaurants and over a decade of interviewing owners for our Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast and our film series and our 2 books, ones that have a great culture, a well-defined culture, a repeatable culture that can be taught and enforced, always continue to grow and thrive. That's a very clear line that you can draw. I've been able to draw. So I wanted to have Dave Nitzel back on to talk specifically about this presentation, Building Your Culture, The Aperture Effect. And it's fantastic. This is a great conversation. Dave's a super sharp guy. This is an excellent presentation, so we want to make sure that you get your hands on it if you'd like to learn more after listening to this podcast. But Dave Nitzel and Dave Domzalski are names you're going to hear. They're doing great work in the hospitality industry. They're helping restaurants and bars and restaurant businesses and groups improve and thrive. So, without further ado, we're going to get right to Dave. But before we do, let's hear from our lead sponsor and Schedulefly partner, Pop Menu. Pop Menu is, they're a partner of Schedulefly, and we have a lot of happy mutual customers. But Pop Menu is all about making your day easier and your sales bigger. They will simplify your marketing operations, bring in more guests, capture customer data for personalized remarketing to keep them coming back. With one super simple to use platform that integrates with most point of sales like Toast and Square and a number of others, Pop Menu starts with a beautifully designed, easy to update interactive menu that transforms the guest experience online. It includes a brand new website that's optimized for search engines like Google for no additional cost, automated digital marketing, online ordering and waitlisting, and you'll never miss another call with their AI answering solution that costs as little as 47 cents an hour. Check it out. Check out the link in our show notes. There's so much more in Pop Menu. Here's my 2 cents. I've talked to a lot of our mutual customers, and here's what they say about Pop Menu. Great company, great customer service, great product, great results. Check out Pop Menu and check out this episode of Restaurant Owners Uncorked. Thank you all for listening. See ya. Wow, this is pretty cool. This is Dave Nitzel here with me for the second time in like a month.
Back by popular demand.
In person. We're here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and have a lot of good stuff going on here today. But we wanted to get back together and talk deep dive into the subject of culture. So Dave, thank you for the work that you've done and taking the time to hang out with me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I enjoy it, so happy to be here.
Well, okay. So when we did a podcast about your book, Dave and Dave, Hospitality DNA, and we talked about culture during that. You talk a lot about culture in the book. You and I are very aligned that culture is kind of like the most important thing with great restaurants and hospitality businesses. I mean, you find that all the ones that win the awards and that endure and that are successful for years and that grow and thrive and prosper, you can almost always point to, well, look, they have a very clearly defined, codified, well-executed, well-known culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you decided to, after doing this amazing book, you continued with that work, with a course on culture, which I went through in the last couple of days and I really loved. So, just, I guess, start out just telling me, just give me your thoughts on why culture is so important and why you decided to continue the work that you had done, that you guys, Dave and both of you guys had done in the book.
Yeah, I'll answer it sort of from an author book perspective and work into the culture bit. So, we were on a contract with the book, and we had like a 60,000 word deal. And we were on, I think, word 75,000. And our publisher was like, hey, man, like you're obliterating the deal. And we're like, yeah, but there's so much to say. And having interviewed 30-some people, the stories to tell, there's so much to say. We're learning like crazy. It's not all of our stuff. It's mostly other people's stuff and then our interpretation of it. So it felt like at the end, there was just so much more to coach on. And we told stories and we have great lessons and guidance, but there was a need to go deeper. And I was very aware of that. You felt it after reading the book. I was like, hey, there's more here. And Dave and I felt that. So we thought, well, it would be easy enough to just stop, but it just felt like it still feels like a work incomplete. As much as we share, there's more. And culture was a huge part of it. As it relates to culture, we talk about this, everyone has one. You got that in the deck that we did. Everyone has a culture. The question is it the one you want? Who's driving that culture? How's it affecting the business? How well defined is it? These sorts of things. And maybe even more than that, how do I create a culture? I hear this, yada, yada. I'll hear interviews all the time. I'm listening more and more to industry podcasts, and people will talk about their culture, but it can be really hard to define. And is it just something that we observe and we see it and we say, look, this is just sort of how we behave and we're good about behaving this way? That is, in fact, a culture, but it's not necessarily well defined. So the exercise I think you picked up on was, hey, if I go to any business owner and say, tell me what are the 3, 4, 5 things that matter the most to you in the business? What defines your culture? And write them down. And they write those 3, 4, 5 things down. And then I take those 3 or 4, 5 things and I take it to the staff and I say, hey, what are the 3, 4, 5 things that matter most in this business day in, day out, the non-negotiables? If they all match and everyone's saying the exact same thing and everything's aligned, chances are you got a pretty good culture. Typically what happens is everyone is interpreting your culture differently. We might be executing with some synchronicity, but the truth is it's not extremely well defined. And you might ask then, and I'll have to take a breath here, I'm rolling, right? I'll shut up in a minute.
Nice.
So then you might say, well then, why do I need to define it so much? Like, why do I have to do that work? Everything's going well. That's exactly the time where you want to do that work, when things are going well. Because you're going to lean on your culture when things aren't going so well. People have left. There's some kind of tumult in the business. And you want to have that well-defined culture, not for when times are great, although it matters then, but you really want that well-defined culture when things aren't going so well. And that's why we saw certain people thrive during COVID. Like, how is that possible? It's because they had well-defined cultures, incredibly loyal teams who knew what their purpose and their why was, and they just weren't going to jump off the ship, even when it seemed like it was certain the ship was going down, right? Which was COVID. Hey, I don't know if this is going to be. I really have a responsibility to myself to think about my career, and I got to feed my family. Am I going to stick it out with these guys? And the answer for these really strong, cultured organization was, people stuck it out with them. So that's a really long answer. I apologize.
Well, it's funny because when you're talking about that, about needing to do it when times are good, because you don't know when. I mean, COVID came out of nowhere. That was a black swan event, unpredicted, massive impact.
Yeah.
You don't know when the next thing that you can't predict is going to happen. I mean, look at John Seelbinder. Had his, a giant building burned down right down the street from his brewery, and that kind of, there's no way to plan for that. So that's when you need to have already had a very tightly woven, well-defined, bought into, thoughtful, intentional culture, so that everybody rallies together. And
absolutely, there's times, look, life is unpredictable.
Yeah,
and it might be personal. We might have, heaven forbid, but if we have an owner or ownership group that's operating on, say, a cult of personality, which a lot of people do in this industry, and if you're operating on a cult of personality, and heaven forbid something happens to you on the personal life where you have to excuse yourself from the business for 3, 4, 5 months, you want to be able to do that with a high degree of confidence, knowing everything that you've established and you're walking away from because you have to, is you can count on it.
Yeah.
That the brand isn't going to suffer in your absence. That is it doesn't take much in this industry for brands to take hits. It can happen rather immediate. A bad Friday night, a bad Saturday night. You start racking up some bad reviews. Your reputation takes a bit of a hit, and now people are starting to look at options.
Right.
You want to keep people out of looking at other better options. You want to stay top of mind, the top priority, and you want to be a bit recession-proof, economy-proof. That sort of thing happens through building a great culture where you just stay top of mind for people because you execute at a level that is highly reliable on the guest side, and you don't want that to be totally dependent on you. You want it to be dependent on what you've built. And then you get into scalability, like we talked about. Culture can scale. Personality absolutely cannot. You might get away with a little bit of that, but you'll eventually burn yourself out. Like, it's not built to last, and it's not built to scale or en masse. It's only, at best, you're going to get a few venues out of a personality-driven culture.
Yeah, right. Yeah, eventually it just hits a breaking point. There's just no way. Okay. So one of the things you talk about in here, I found this was really interesting, is you said that 70% of restaurants and bars fail within the first 3 years, which is a pretty commonly, I guess, accepted statistic, well known. Only 5% earn the profit they deserve. I thought that was fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about that and how do we measure what they deserve? What is it when we say 5% earn the profit they deserve?
So if you think full potential of a venue operating at its maximum potential, we've seen evidence, real numbers of 30% profit, which is off the charts. 30%,
which was in the book. Yeah,
it's in the book.
Yeah.
So we know it can be done. It requires some ingenuity and creativity. But that can be done. The indomitable spirit comes out. A lot of things come out in order to achieve that, and it's awesome to see. There's a lot of people. It's an interesting question. If you said what the typical high performer, not the 1% of the 1%ers, but your more typical high performers probably operating in the 12-15% range, and that's doing very well. You're still not normal at that point. You said, hey, what should I shoot for? If I'm doing well, you get a 15% drop, you're doing well. You can get a 20% drop, and I'm saying, look, you're in rarefied air. 30's crazy.
Yeah.
So you get in that 12-15%, you're doing okay. A lot of people are operating in the 0 to 5% range.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to collect a salary. I'd like to pay myself. There's a lot of people saying, hey, I haven't paid myself yet, especially in that first 0 to 3 years. They're working to sustain the business. but they're not sustaining themselves. They're certainly not thriving. And that is true for a lot of small business. Look, a lot of the culture conversation, we could apply this conversation to just about any small business.
Yeah, agreed.
Why is it different for bars and restaurants? Because bars and restaurants, this is my take as sort of an interloper, right? I'm not from the industry. I've been in it 10 years, but I still feel like a newbie at this thing.
Yeah.
So as an interloper, I look and I say, this thing consumes you right out of the gate. So a lot of small businesses start slow, and people sort of have a wind up and they get to think through some things, and you just don't get consumed by the business. This business consumes you.
Yes, it does.
So if you don't get going, and if you don't establish these cultural type items, which will immediately seem unimportant relative to, I got some bad Google reviews. I don't have a bartender showing up. My chef quit. All of a sudden, creating your culture seems like, I don't have time for that nonsense. Like hocus pocus. I need to get a chef. I need to get a bartender. All of the above is true. But the culture bit plays where the stronger the culture, the less you're going to need to do those things. They're still going to happen. You're still going to need to do those things, but to a much lesser degree, and allows you to step away from business and think about your business and work on your business, not in it, as you hear a lot. So all that's true. So when you say deserve, I look at the amount of effort people put into this, and I'm in awe. I really, truly am.
Yeah, I agree.
And coming from the corporate world, and I'll tell you, I worked at places that were fighting to make 10%, but we were fighting to make 10% on billions.
Yeah, right.
So that's a different 10%. That's a very different 10%. There's economy of scale at that 10%. For the local owners, like 5%, you're not going to be able to pay yourself much of a salary. If you're one venue doing reasonably okay at 5%, that's not the dream.
Yeah.
So people deserve, look, if you're putting the work in and all that sort of thing, our aspiration is to lift people up and get them to that 12 to 15. We think that's incredibly reasonable. And when you get to that 12 to 15, we're going to have the conversation about how do you get to 20. And then when we get to 20, we're going to have that conversation. Hey, you can get to 30. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Or do we want to scale at 20? How do we want to, there's a lot of paths that you can take. So that's how we think about it. Now, I'll tell you what else about that, too. If you look at the failure rate, which is an interesting number, that failure rate, we don't have great insight into what that failure rate looks like. Who are they? So if I was to say, do you think within that 70% failure rate, it includes people who have put a lot of time into building their culture, people who have, and we're going into the book a little bit, people who have had great mentors, have a lifetime experience, have built their culture, have a strong partnership team. When you start putting those factors in, that number is significantly decreasing.
Right.
The odds are moving. So are the odds of those people failing in the first 3 years high if you fit those descriptors? No. Those folks are going to be okay. The folks who are struggling are the ones that don't do those things. I would hazard to guess a lot of the people who are listening to your podcast probably don't fit the description of the 70% failure rate. So they may hear some of those things and go, yeah, no, I'm good on that stuff. And I'd say, yeah, you probably are. I would then make the same bet and say, I bet you don't have a well-defined, written-down culture, however, and you probably are working on some version. It's more common than not that people are working on a version of personality. And what happens if I take you out of this thing? Does it run as good or better if I remove you? Because that's another neat conversation, is if I get you out of your business, would it be better? And if you really built a killer team with a killer culture that you can turn them loose, and you've built strengths around your weaknesses, I've seen that happen. That's not a crazy thought, but it's just a different way to think. Like those, I don't hear those conversations happening in our industry, in this industry.
Yeah, boy. I mean, it gets into, we kind of, I switched toggle between the book and what I went through yesterday, your presentation. I mean, and you talk about it in here, self-awareness. Self-awareness is such a big thing. I mean, checking your ego and having the self-awareness, and as you talk about in the book, how important humility is to say, okay, I've got this indomitable spirit, this vibrant personality, this creative mind, these genius ideas, these great plans, and I've built this incredible place, and now I'm on 2 and 3 or whatever, but you can't scale you, and you have this strong understanding of what the culture is because it's in you.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go ask your 5, and it's such a great litmus. Like, I would ask anybody that's listening to just if you, whatever your culture is, whatever you think it is, write it down, and then go ask your, top 5 or 10 people in your team or in your organization and write it down and just compare. What a great way to say, okay, do we really have?
Are we aligned?
Yeah, are we aligned? And even if we've been through the process and we think we've been aligned, but are we still where we need to be? We did it 5 years ago, and do we still all align on that? And how has that culture grown and changed? I mean, you talked about in here, how the what do you call them, the business culture influencers, BCIs, your new acronym. Your current BCIs and your future BCIs, because we're always growing our culture and making it even better and even tighter and even more resilient and even more welcoming and so forth.
I'll give you, if I may, too. Let me jump in. You spurred a thought. So one of the most awesome byproducts of a great culture, which is vital to this industry that gets way underestimated, is productivity. So if you get everyone aligned culturally, and let's say we do that exercise, if everyone's aligned on exactly what we stand for and what matters the most and how we think and behave in the business, people know the answers to questions. The great culture and a well-defined culture answers most of the small and big questions that are going to come our way because we know how to think. Essentially, your culture is nothing more than the manifestation of your thoughts and your behaviors in the business. So if I know how we think and operate, and if I'm very clear about what matters the most, so if I work for ScheduleFly, it'd be really clear to me when a customer called with a complaint that I would be greenlit to do whatever I need to do to take care of that problem right here and now. I'm not making 3 phone calls to say, do I have permission?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I get that right away. I get that vibe. So when your business is operating that way, well, using ScheduleFly, I get that call. Guess who didn't get that call? Will. You didn't get that call because your team understands very clearly what matters the most. You didn't just, okay, what's their phone number? Let me call them, make the call, tell me again what the problem is. Let me look into it. Let me get back to you. I get back to you. And a small problem just took an hour out of your day.
Yeah.
Imagine that in the bar and restaurant business where we're faced with I shouldn't say we, where they, and I don't mean they, I want to be part of it, man. I want to be part of the solution, so I get confused. Should I say we? Should I say they? Let's say they. Bar and restaurant owners, if they don't have a strong culture and the team doesn't know the answers to how do I behave and what are the right actions, you get caught up in the business, on the business, and you're answering questions that people should otherwise be able to answer themselves. They know the answer. Like, that's like one of my favorite questions to ask my team. They'll ask me a question and I'll just ask, well, what's the answer? What do you think it is? I'm like, well, I think it's this. Well, why are you calling me? You know the answer. Believe in yourself. You got this.
Yeah.
And I was listening, it might have been, I think it was who was the gal that you just entered? Was it Kate?
Kate Wolverton.
Oh, man.
She's freaking awesome.
Oh, listen. I was listening to Kate talk about the freedom to fail. Wasn't she the one that was
Yes.
Oh, boy. I love it. Look, we don't want massive amounts of failure, all right? And people are afraid to say, we're not programmed to say it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
But failure is the greatest teacher.
Yeah.
And if I have the freedom to know that I can make a mistake, I also then have the freedom to make decisions. And you've also demonstrated a ton of trust in me in the business. You're doing me a huge favor. I'll make some trade-offs. If there's 10 decisions I don't have to make today because you're empowered to make those 10 and you screw one of them up, yeah, I think I'm making those deals. So it's up to the individual person to decide what those, what would you say, toggles are, how you
what are the parameters that you can fail in, right?
But I encourage people to think in those terms, especially in this industry. There's just not the time. But this is cool, man. I have folks who are in that 15% plus range, the rarefied air profit range. They're living a fundamentally different life. They're living the lives they deserve. I look at some of them like, are you ever coming back to this country? Like they're just traveling and I'm watching their lifestyle and I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. You go. Like, you earned that.
Right.
You have no worries. You're experiencing. they're double. Now those folks are multiplying, right? It becomes this multiplying effect that they have. And look, I nerd out on this. I get super excited about it. But candidly, Will, I've been trained. Like, I'm not just pulling this out of thin air.
Yeah.
So I was trained on a future CEO team of a top 100 company in America. I've been on the CEO teams of top 100 companies in America, and these are the kind of conversations we have. So I'm not making this stuff up, and I don't have a lot of original thoughts. I just sort of accumulate best practices, which isn't unlike the books that I write. You know, I none of the books are, hey, trust me, these are my original ideas, and aren't I smart? That is not what we're writing. We're writing, listen to these other folks, and aren't they smart? And look at what we've learned. I've learned a ton. If not for this book, we're not having this conversation.
Yeah.
And this book is a byproduct of award-winning talent that we said, then what are you doing? And what makes you different? How are you doing this? And that's what all that is. So, yeah, again, I'm rambling on.
No, man. Well, you know, I can't wait to tell Kate that, because I asked her afterwards. I so thoroughly enjoyed talking to her.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's such she has a sharp mind, and she cares so much about what she does, and is able to articulate what they're doing at Niche so well. And I said, look, tell me the 2 minutes, what I told you, like, tell me the 2 minute clip, you know, that you like, and I'll clip it out. And she's like, well, I'm my own worst critic, so I don't know anything in there that was, you know, I don't, but she said the one about, you know,
failing forward.
Yeah. Being
failing
able to fail
forward is
like,
great. And there's parameters, like, don't make huge mistakes. Like, don't, but look, small mistakes,
but
and learn from
you
them.
You need people to not feel scared to try. And
Yeah. I mean, I'll see folks whose phones just ring off the hook. I can't have a conversation. I'll be in there with an owner. I'm like, well, what are the... And then I hear the conversation. I'll be sitting like we are right now. And I'm like, well, why are you answering those questions? Like, how is that call getting to you?
Yeah.
Why? And the truth of the matter is they're their own worst enemy. Yeah. That call's getting them because they let that call get to them. And then you just keep peeling that onion back, which people can math out. But you got to prevent those calls from coming to you and empower people. And with that comes an element of trust and frankly, an element of failure you have to be okay with.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the interesting thing to me is well, all this is interesting, but like the idea of scalability, of how do we scale? Like, okay, it's fine. I've got 1 or 2 locations. I've got this culture. I can manage it. And then as you start to grow, trying to scale that. And, you know, I thought it was interesting. You talk about the things that are scalable and the things that constrain you. Your cost model.
Yeah, the cost model. Being
consistent, having order, self-awareness, trust. You actually, you know, you got in my head about trust. You have some really, you do it in the book too, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting about trust is everybody would say, like, if you ask somebody, are you trustworthy? Most people are going to say,
yes.
Heck yeah, I'm trustworthy.
Of course I am.
But the way you define trust actually had me like really hustling to make sure I got here today in time, because I said I'd be here between 7:30 and 7:45.
Yeah.
And one of the things you say is like, you know, like, trust is like, if you say you're going to be somewhere, like, are you there? Or if you say, you know, you mentioned like for scheduling, like, you know, if you tell me you're not going to schedule me on weekends, but then you schedule me on a weekend because you're like, well, I really needed you. We were, you know, whatever. Like, you don't, as the person who did that to the employee, you're not thinking yourself as being not trustworthy, but that actually is a level of trust, because you're breaking a commitment. It's not that you deliberately lied to the person and deceptively were untrustworthy, but I thought that was a really interesting way that y'all look at trust. All right, y'all, time for a little mid-episode break to talk about Kickfin, our mid-episode sponsor and a great business. Thousands of restaurants, bars, and breweries use Kickfin to tip out their employees instantly, no cash required. With Kickfin, tips go directly to your employer's bank of choice the second their shift ends. It's a really simple solution to a really big problem, because if you're still paying out credit card tips in cash, it's costing you. Time-consuming bank runs and cash counting take managers away from work that matters. Cash is hard to track, which leads to accounting headaches, and it creates the perfect opportunity for theft, human error, and compliance issues. Bottom line, there's never been an instant secure way to pay out tips until Kickfin. It's an easy-to-use software that sends real-time cashless tip payouts straight to your employees' bank accounts 24/7, 365. Kickfin gives managers hours back in their day, makes reporting a breeze, and protects your business from risk. Most importantly, employees love it. Restaurants can have Kickfin up and running overnight. Employees can enroll in seconds. No hardware, no contracts, no setup fees. Visit kickfin.com for a personalized demo and see how restaurants across the country are digitizing tips with Kickfin. That's what they like me to read. I will tell you this. I know the folks at Kickfin. Check out the episode with Brian Hassan, the co-CEO of Kickfin, was on here on the podcast. Great people, love what they do. They treat their customers well. We have mutual customers that love the product and love the way they, the relationship they have with Kickfin. So check it out, link in the show notes, and let's check out the rest of this episode.
Yeah, look, it's the cost model for scaling is funny. You could look at that and go, yeah. You could look at that and say, yeah, that's, again, I'm aware of this. You could look at that and say, that's all academic. I say, okay, I'll take you on if you want to have that. If you wanted to, what are you going to tell me that scaling is about real estate? Are you going to tell me it's about your concept? Are you going to tell me it's about your products, your food, your creations? I don't believe that. I'll have that argument with you. And I can be defeated. Maybe someone brings such a strong case. But for the most part, scaling is about the ability to maneuver and build and get outside of your own way. And the way we do that is surrounding ourselves with really talented teams that, what would you say, exemplify our values. And the cost model is a really clean way to explain that, and there's nothing in there that someone can't understand. And that's really important as a coach. I don't know who's picking this book up. I want to be able to reach people. So like you said, look, you're a super smart guy. You run a gigantic, awesome business, and in our cost model, trust hit you. Like, it challenged you. Yeah, that's exactly the point. Like, and it's good. So order's a great one.
Well,
consistency.
Yeah.
So the first one's consistency. That's so easy to blow off. Consistency. Yeah. So what? Look, if you're scaling, consistency's everything. Are we operating the same way everywhere all the time? Is it repeatable? We have Riz in London. Great story in the book. Liz has 11 venues, and they're not all the same venue. He has music venues and bars and nightclubs and all these different types, right, of concepts. So right there tells you that, look, the concept doesn't so much matter. You're putting a great product out there, but specifically nightclub, music venue, cocktail bar, seal binder has no concepts the same. But what these folks can do is I can take a general manager out of one venue, plug them right into the other, because internally the way we run our business, our culture, our behaviors, our beliefs, our actions are the same. No matter what the concept is, no matter where it's located. These things don't matter in terms of our scalability. The way I need to scale is I need talented people who believe in what I believe in, who think similarly to me with adjacent skill sets. I can scale with that. If I go to, and I won't name names, but there's someone in the book who has an unimaginably awesome concept. And he said to us, he goes, look, I can't scale this. Because our question was, when's the next one coming? He's like, I don't think there is a next one in me. Right? That's a critical, there's not another one in me. Why not? Can you not do it? It's too heavily dependent on me. I don't think this happens without me. And that's fine. He's doing great. He's happy. He doesn't have to scale. But the thoughts obviously crossed his mind. He's given it a lot of thought, and he came to the conclusion that, as great as the culture is inside my four walls, this particular concept, so maybe I'm contradicting myself a little bit, that particular concept is so reliant upon him, he can't get out of it. And what would happen to it if he did? That's tough. So he has to find someone who can play that role, and maybe he's just not ready to give it up. Maybe it would be just fine without him, but great conversations.
You wonder about that, because then the question is, well, what happens if something happens to you?
Right. Yeah.
So,
and if I'm a partner, that's a real concern.
That's
of
a
mine.
big concern. Wait a minute, you can't scale without you.
And So yeah.
Well, you talk about success-seeking order. That's one of the cost being consistent order, self-awareness, and trust. And you talk about success-seeking order. I highlighted that and circled that. I had never really thought about that before, but that's people that are successful, or that are gonna be successful. That's what they're looking for. And boy, in this industry, there's a lot of places there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of drama.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of competition. People will leave you in a minute. Yeah. So there's folks out there who don't have staffing issues. Imagine that. Like,
yeah, right.
If you're listening to this podcast and you heard nothing other than, how would you like to not have staffing issues? Because I will tell you, 90%, maybe plus, of the conversations we're having today are about staffing with our clients.
Yeah.
You can't find people, can't get people, and this sort of thing. You go to these places, and there's lines at the door. There's people waiting to work there. They're waiting to leave, perhaps you, to go to these places. Why? Well, there's money there. There's career pathing there. There's opportunities. There's the ability to learn and mentor. Ivy Mix in the book asks question, who'd you study under? Who'd you learn from? That's who she's interested in hiring. And those are the same people that want to come and study and learn from her now. Right. So the question is, well, I'm here to learn from you. That's a neat transition in your career when you get to the point where people want to mentor under you, and you're no longer the mentee, although I don't know how much that ever changes. Hopefully we're all always learning.
Yeah.
But that's a big, order's a big piece. People want stability. They want to know, hey, I can count on this amount of money. I can count, again, trust. Are they good on their word? How many times does someone come into a job, hectic scenario, you hire a talented person, you're excited about them, say, hey, I could see you being an assistant general manager here someday. You got that stuff. Oh, wow. No one's ever said that to me. Yes, that's what I want to do. But you got to work your way up. You're going to start as a server, and let's get you out there, and we're going to get you trained up. And then life hits, business hits, and that future assistant GM's now been a server for 6 months. No one's revisited the conversation with her. No one's had a 3-month review, a 6-month review. No one's asked about how'd the onboarding go. How do you like the job? You got trained for 2 shifts. You got turned loose, and hey, you show up every day. That's great. Wow, we can count on her. She's great. She's showing up. Thank goodness. Everything seems wonderful. Seems happy. And then she gives you your 2 weeks notice. You're like, well, why are you leaving? What happened? Well, typically folks aren't really honest with you. Hey, man, Will, I like you. You're a good dude. I'm not going to say, hey, look, you lied to me. You didn't come through. You broke promises, and I found a better place that I don't think will do those things. People won't say that. So then owners are left to wonder, and they typically don't wonder. They don't typically paint themselves in the worst light. So the answer will be, well, they found a better opportunity. They didn't want to work the shifts I was working, because people will give you a soft landing.
Yeah,
they do.
Right.
But the truth is, that person probably never really wanted to leave. You just didn't follow up on the things that you said you were going to do. So that's trust, that's order, that's consistency, that's your ability to scale just in that one little vignette. That's how you scale. If she stays and you have a whole team of her, what can't you do?
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want. You want to open 2, 3, 4, let's do it. And you've got examples of folks that we were here last night with the Dram and Draft guys. They can't stop opening places. Post-COVID, they've opened 5 venues? Post-COVID, 5?
Yeah.
Not in big cities, not in New York, in small. I'm blown away, absolutely blown away by those guys. So it's 100% possible. And then last night, so Kevin is one of the owners, Kevin and Drew. So we were having a similar conversation over, again, too many cocktails.
No, those guys have plenty, I think, yeah.
Man, you can't go out like late nights at the bar and restaurant, folks, and then have an early AM
I had Kevin on the podcast. We drank bourbon during the podcast. We did a bourbon tasting.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
Look, I love these folks. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful industry. I'm inspired to help, right? So where was I? Oh, yeah, so we started having this conversation. I said, because I was testing him. I was like, what are your 5 culture? What are your 5 pillars? Well, first off, I said, what are your 4? He goes, no, there's 5. I was like, no, there's 4. He goes, 5. I said, people can't. So then we had a little argument about 4 or 5, which was just in good fun. And then he rattled them off to me. Boom, 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 boom. He knew what his 5 were. And I said, if I went and asked your team, the exercise we talked about. He goes, yeah, everyone knows that. See, I drill that into people. That's all I talk about all the time. And here we have someone who's scaled 5 venues post-COVID. They're thriving. Like, it's just not an accident. I don't think people by nature take it serious enough, and they want to believe they have a culture. They do. Everyone has one, but they want to believe it's more defined than what it is. It's not typically as defined as what you'd like to think it is.
Well, that touches on a point that you really nailed in there, which however defined you think your culture is, or whether you think you have a culture. Now the question is, who's defining it? I thought that was a fascinating point you talk about with, if it isn't like what Kevin has as 5 pillars and they drill it in, they're all aware and everybody, then it becomes, and maybe you're just assuming it's the culture because this is the way I do things and people follow my lead and this is what I believe and I talk about it and stuff in meetings. But then if you're not there drilling it in and just hammering it home all the time and everybody's not super clear on it, then the culture bleeds into like who's the most dominant person in that restaurant.
Yeah.
That may be the GM, or as you mentioned it, if there's a soft GM that's, not real commanding, it may be just the loudest voice in the room. And then all of a sudden your culture is like that person, and that can get toxic really fast.
Every business has a culture.
Yeah.
Right? So there's really no such thing as, well, I don't believe in culture. Well, you've got one. So then the question is, do you have the one you want?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And is there a disconnect between the one you want and the one you have? That's common. That's way more common than not. That a
disconnect between the one you want and the one one you
have.
Yeah.
And then you'd say, well, why is that? And then you'll get a list of reasons of whatever that is. And usually those are off target reasons.
Uh-huh.
It sounds critical. I'm not here to be like
right,
but usually it's off target. And I'll give you a great, there's a book called The First 90 Days.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 90 days, and the first 90 day, the 90 part doesn't apply to our industry, I don't think, but the concept does. And then the book, The First 90 Days, it says, hey, when you get a new gig, you get a new job, make no decisions for 90 days. Your whole, your mission in those first 90 days is to absorb the culture of the business that you're in, make allies and friends, build your personal brand within the brand. So we all have a brand within the brand. We have a personal brand that we're working. And figure out how to get things done. You build these alliances, and then when the time comes, you haven't done any personal brand damage. You haven't stepped on your own toes trying to get things done. You haven't made a mess of things being in a rush. You don't have a bucket of regrets. At 90 days, you're good to go. You should be. And now you can start doing things efficiently, effectively, with a personal brand built, etc. Right? So blah, blah. The opposite extreme of that, I think, in our industry is I see GMs come in and it's new sheriff in town day one. New chef comes in, new chef in town day one. Everything you've been doing, forget it. We have a new way of doing things around here, and it's my way or the highway. Look, and I understand some of that. I understand a chef has to run their kitchen. I get that. But a chef or a bartender or a general manager, nobody's bigger than the business. It's no different than sports. The quarterback's not bigger than the team. No one's bigger than the business. And the business has to have a culture that people adhere to. It's the owners that set. It's the owners who should be setting the culture. This is my business. It's my investment. It's my brand. You guys are all critical players in that brand, and here's how we behave. But I'll see businesses upended just on a one critical hiring change, usually in the general manager ranks. Everything will change. Sometimes there needs to be change, but it shouldn't be a cultural change. It's probably more on a process, procedure, leadership side, which that happens every day. We all get it. But the business culture or you have someone who's not following the culture and you need to make a change because this person is culturally misaligned with the business. Got that. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's typically not the type of conversations we're having. So yeah, I mean, it's a good conversation, man. I get a little lost in it, but that's how I think about leadership change. Culture is the thing that we build the business on. not personality or people, not our chef, not our bartenders, you're getting in trouble. You'll be held hostage in a minute. At some point, you're going to be up against it. So you want to have a strong bench and people that can interchangeable. To some degree, you want interchangeable parts.
It is the foundation. I mean, and it's interesting because it is such a nebulous thing. And what you do a great job of is helping pare that down and show people how to codify that. You take them through. I thought it was funny because you have a culture statement and you've got, your pillars and your intent and your how is culture applied in action. This was hilarious to me, is that you said some people will take that slide and literally just go okay, why don't we use that? That's how, but I think that speaks to how nebulous culture. It's hard. It's a hard thing to. You may feel it inside as an owner, but then you have this team, and and it's not just you've got to figure out what do we all really want to stand for. As you talk about in here, what do we hire for? What do we fire for? You gave a great example. I won't recite it, but I think it may have been. Well, you've told it to me before. But It was just, some bad activity that was happening within an organization that you knew, and that clearly wasn't part of their culture, but it continued to happen. And so that should be a fireable thing. That should never, and I would imagine, Dave, I mean, this is it's one thing. Okay. So, you say in here early on, culture is the most important asset a business has. Okay. So if we say, okay, then this is, I'm in, okay, I want to build a really strong culture. I want to, as Kevin has, I want my 4 or my 5 pillars. I want to know what they are. I want my team to know what they are, and that is my foundation. I'm going to build this company and this business, and we're going to thrive because I'm bought in. I want to have this culture. And you figure it out, and you work with your team, and you go through this process, and you figure out your pillars, and you figure out the intent behind those pillars, and you figure out how do we execute on that. Okay. But then it's a discipline. I would think you've got to have the discipline to continue to invest into that culture and to execute on that culture, even when it means making really hard decisions, because the friendship you have with this person that you've known for whatever that's broken the culture, the culture has to come first, I guess is what I'm saying, is what I'm gathering from what you.
And discipline might be part of your culture. I would encourage anyone to include discipline.
Yeah.
Look, anyone. This isn't easy. I don't pretend for a second.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how hard this can be. Again, at the top, but at the top levels of where I've been, people the smartest people I've ever known I've seen screwed this up.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about. So okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll get a little more. I won't name names, but a little more specific around the context. We would pour millions of dollars into culture training, cascading it through the organization, bouncing it, sending it down, having it bounce back up, and all the stuff that we'd do. We would emulate. I was with a different organization where we did the whole Jack Welch bit, and people hated us for it. People hated doing this culture stuff because they felt like we were mailing it in, we were doing it for the optics. So it's not enough to just go through the exercise. Is woefully inadequate, almost worse than not doing it all. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you got to be really careful. Don't start down this path if you're not fully committed to it, which is your discipline part. And in another organization, we had what I would call a beautiful. I loved it. I'd have worked there the rest of my life. I would have stayed there forever, and I loved the culture that we were supposed to have. And the problem was, 90% of the company had the culture we were supposed to have. It was the people that created the culture that didn't apply it to themselves and lacked discipline around being fully committed to the culture, and then identifying in an honest way things and people that were culturally broken in the organization, but we didn't want to face that reality. And so those folks caused havoc, and they prevented the organization from growing in ways that it could otherwise have grown. And these, again, all these people are some of the smartest human beings I have ever been around. But they suffered on self-awareness, which is the leadership trait that I think is most important. So you ended up having leadership and self-awareness issues. And as soon as the leadership team professes to have a certain culture and then breaks that culture, what would you say? That reverberates throughout the entire organization. So when you create your culture, you better live it. There's power in that when you do, and there's problems in that when you don't. But the power is way better than the problems if you can get there. So I don't, if all of this is making sense. I'm trying not to make, I'm trying to avoid.
Makes a ton of sense.
Yeah,
I started out in corporate America. I got out of college and I started out in corporate America. I worked at a very big bank, and there was a culture statement, and we went through, but it was there. Like and we all had to know it. And I even did a presentation. I was young. I was like 23, and we had like our team meeting. Like, I'm going to do the and it was like these 5 pillars.
Yeah.
And I remember just being fully bought in. And then it wasn't long. I mean, I was there like 3 years. I'm like, yeah, but like I bought into this stuff.
Right.
Like, and it totally is not how we operate. It's just behave. A thing that they,
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, it was a rash decision at a young age. I was like, I'm not cut out for corporate America. I just labeled all of corporate America like, okay, it's a bunch of BS, and I'm just a dude who like really identifies with authenticity. And so
that's a shame too, by the way, because that doesn't have to be true. It doesn't matter how big you are, in my opinion. That doesn't have to be true, whether you have 10 employees or 100,000.
Yeah.
Leadership starts at the top. Culture starts with leadership. And then you have accountability and discipline in these things. So like you triggered the thought with the discipline. Look, that matters. Don't even bother doing this exercise if you don't have the discipline and the wherewithal to see it all the way through. You don't do it. That's, you're kind of where you are. If you do it, just be fully committed to whatever you put on that paper and live it. And then everyone will live it with you.
Yeah.
And there's magic in that. There's real magic. And it can be devastation in screwing it up. People will forgive you, but man, handle it with care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, okay, Dave, we got people interested. People are listening to this are like, okay, maybe my culture is not like, I'm bought in. Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
How do we connect people with you? You guys are phenomenal. The work you've done, the Hospitality DNA book, all the work that you and Dave are doing, man, I really respect you guys. I value what you're doing. I believe in it. I think that it's extremely important. And you and I share the trait that we're outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
We're fans of the game. We have a lot of respect for people in this industry, and we hope to do something that can help people improve and be better and learn and grow and thrive, because we love the people in the industry and we love the industry itself. And we see examples of people that really get it. So people that are listening to this, what do they do?
That's a great question. Look, I'm still working through some of that myself. It's a little embarrassing. I don't have a perfect answer for that. Some of this is Dave and I love we love the work. We haven't necessarily ABC'd this all the way out the way we should. Okay, so the honest answer to that is, first, grab the book on Amazon. That's an easy one.
Hospitality DNA.
Yeah, and we have the Bar Shift too, our first book, which is an SOP, which is really just a best practice book for running your bar. But that thing's turned into an international bestseller. I thought maybe my mom and a handful of other people would buy it, and that's been great. So there's the Bar Shift and there's Hospitality DNA, and that's immediately available. Hospitality DNA in all formats. So that's new for us, which is fun. As for the rest of the stuff, and you kind of know this, we've built a website that just has stuff on it. There's nothing to ask. There's no buy. It's daveanddave.co. You can check us out there for free if you want to see more. So we're kind of proud of our website, but it isn't doing anything. So yeah, hey, smart business guy, you've done nothing. Yeah, it's true. Like we are moving fast and trying to figure stuff out. And
Dave and spelled out.
daveanddave.co, not com, just co.
I got you.
But we're a two-man army here trying to do stuff as quick as we can. So the next phase is I have built this courseware, and you got it, you liked it. I told you I'm happy to make that available to anyone listening to your podcast in some form or fashion. Maybe we can figure that out. We can make it available on Schedulefly. It is coming soon to daveanddave.co. We just have to figure out how to put it on there and how to transact, and we haven't figured that out yet. But we will certainly do something special. You've been such an amazing advocate. I'm a huge fan of what you do in your business process. I like your customers. You know, I listen to your interviews. I'm like, man, these are great people.
They're awesome.
Yeah, I'm not hamming it up. Like, I don't have much of an ask. So yeah. It'd be great if you bought the book. It'd be really cool. We are going to get the courseware up. There's 2 bits. The one is right now we have 4. The idea is a 4-pack, and the idea is it's going to be a do-it-yourself, do-it-with me, do-it-for-me options, and that'll scale in price. But it'll all be. I promise it'll be approachable pricing. That's just part of our ethos. Is we don't. I just like to help. I get a lot of juice out of that. So we're going to build this 4-pack. One will be about partnerships. One is going to be about the culture. One is the aperture effect. I'm sorry, not the inception archetype. Man, that's really cool. That's in the book. That was a revelation for me in the book. I was blown away by that. In fact, and we don't have enough time, we're gonna have to do another one. I asked the guys last night, here's a great guy. I shouldn't even, where does a guest experience begin? Right? I won't even answer that, right? But think about that. Well, I can't.
I remember from the book.
You remember from the book, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and again, I didn't make that up, but I was like, this has to be explored. Like I don't have enough words to do this justice. So we built a piece called the Inception Archetype, inspired by Dave Kaplan and the Death & Co. guys.
Yeah.
And we take you through archetype building for guests, which is stuff I don't think this industry does. So I just don't want to be the soundbite. I want to do meaningful, different, unique stuff that can impact people in this industry in a positive way, that brings a little bit of a little bit of thought process and procedure that you might get in corporate America, that most people, I get rejecting that in this industry. Like that I get it. You don't want to be corporate. I wouldn't want that for anyone, but sprinkles of it. It's healthy. If we can extract some of the best
the best practices and some of the things. Yeah, absolutely.
Thought processes.
Yeah.
So we do this inception archetype, and then we build that out, and then we start connecting the idea of the ideal guest to the ideal guest experience. Is our staff oriented towards what your ideal guest wants? When does that experience begin? How do I define that and get great clarity on that? It's awesome. Like we could talk for an hour. I love that. Like, it's a great conversation. So that's a module. So we're going to have that partnerships, culture, the inception archetype. And then I think we're compelled, at least Dave Domzalski is compelled to do, we also have the barometric stuff, heavy duty on the inventory, and costing side of things. And Dave's got a really, really great module about securing and thinking through your pricing and your costing and that sort of thing. It's a little off from Hospitality DNA, but it's spot on the Bar Shift, which is the first book. So I think that's going to be our 4-pack. It's coming soon. So we'll do something for sure special for Schedulefly listeners and customers and that sort of thing. We'll do that with you guys. But for now, it's books on Amazon, the Bar Shift, Hospitality DNA, and we'd love the feedback. We're like,
daveanddave.co. Get in touch with these guys if you're listening. These guys are awesome. You've got Dave Nitzel here. The other Dave is walking in now. Daveanddave.co. Check it out. Get their books. If you want me to connect you, call me. Get in touch with me, and we'll make this happen.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got another one. We got Podcast-a-Loozа going on here.
Yeah,
today.
we're doing Podcast Palooza. It's really cool. We got a bunch of people coming in town to do being productive with podcasts. It's part of our culture, man. Bringing people together, being productive.
Look at that.
Coffee to your door.
I can trust him. He
There you
delivered.
go. There you go.
All right, Dave. This is a wrap, man. This is so
Cool.
fun. Thank you
Cool.
for doing it.
Thanks for
Appreciate
having me,
you.
man.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, y'all, before you sign out on this episode, a couple of quick things. Number one, if you listen to us on iTunes, if you could give us a star rating and a comment, it would help so much. Same thing if you're on Spotify, follow us, or any platform that you're on. If you would just do whatever their rating or follow options are. What that does is it tells the algorithms that this content is good and meaningful and valuable, and it'll tell them to put it in front of more people. So thank you for doing that. If you take the second to do that, that'd be so awesome. And also, if your restaurant is either using Excel or you're using some software that's expensive and has a lot of bells and whistles you don't need, or maybe doesn't have great customer service, we'd love to take care of you at ScheduleFly. Simple, easy restaurant employee scheduling software, legendary customer service, 30-day free trial, schedulefly.com. My cell phone number's on the trial sign-up page. Thank you for listening. See ya.